It has, but I guess
So
I think the phone connection is pretty good. So
yeah,
yeah.
I just got Zoom for my business, and I really like Zoom. And I know I used it when I taught a course with Rich Winter at NYU last year, and I really liked it. So
Oh
I
yeah. Uh
thought
huh. Yeah, that's what we
yeah,
use at the university as well. That's the default
yeah, it's great. Hey,
teleconference.
so I read your paper, guys, and I know you're doing a lot of work with the Army, and you're trying to get them to be innovative. And I got to tell you, when I read this paper, it's glaring the similarities, that problems that NASA has are probably a little bit worse, even with the military. And so I feel your pain.
Uh, Thanks, Charlie. Yeah. So no, I think it's with that spirit that we wanted to talk to you about this upcoming book that we're working on, and to get some of your insights specifically on your experience with NASA, and especially now going forward in an era of converging technologies and drones, AI, etc., and some of your insights on how one, the opportunities you see, and also some of the challenges for an organization like NASA to actually integrate all of these technologies to be really effective.
Yeah, before I left NASA, I retired from NASA May 31st, and right before I went up to headquarters to kind of give them a data dump on the last 4 or 5 years of my work trying to develop a collaborative platform and develop a process to operationalize innovation and complex problem solving. And and try to explain to them, because they were trying to basically transform the way the agency does business, as many organizations are trying to do. They're trying to go through this digital transformation. And I see this in companies and organizations around the world. Everyone's struggling with this digital transformation and what it means. And according to Gartner, 83% of the people that try are going to fail. And I tried to explain this to the folks at NASA. And what I'm seeing in this paper is a very similar uh, um, uh, uh, highlights of what the key problems are with NASA and with organizations like NASA that are very bureaucratic, and they suffer from a culture which is psychologically unsafe. And so one of the things that I'm finding, and I did a presentation on high performing teams and what does it take to really have a high performing team. And psychological safety is the number one element. And unfortunately, I see that in this paper. The risk aversion, the failure for the organization to learn, very averse to and failure, and the risk of failure constrains what these organizations do, and it prevents them from learning also, and it's because of psychological safety. And so I think I had developed several programs trying to train young engineers how to be innovative and to get them to overcome this risk aversion, right? The other thing is that not only that, it's not so much even that NASA is afraid to fail, is the fact that they forgot how to fail. And I think it's hinted at in your paper, getting back to the experimentation and problem-solving approaches, getting out there, conducting experiments, iterative problem-solving, similar to what all good researchers do. The DoD has been out of R&D much longer than even NASA. I don't think NASA has any real serious investment in research and development, probably in the past 30 years. And so when you start walking away from a research and development culture, you're losing the people that understand the importance of failure and how to fail. How to fail smart, fast, small, cheap, early, and often, intelligent, fast failure. And so I see a number of these issues with my friends in the DoD, and I've worked with the DoD on many really cool programs like National Aerospace Plane, and And I know some really good innovative leaders in the military that have retired, like Joe Shabika, that was the head of the Air Force research labs. He was like the administrator of NASA. They have 10 research labs. Very innovative guy, trying to do innovative things. So what I would say, what I see, and how we tried to transform NASA was develop this behind the firewall collaborative environment, but together with a similar environment outside the firewall that was a collaborative environment, getting crowdsourcing with students to solve epic challenges that NASA was struggling with, and then having researchers behind the firewall at NASA basically mentor these students, but also be able to cherry pick some of the really interesting, innovative ideas that they saw and bring it behind the firewall. So what I was proposing was a team of teams kind of approach, where you have these geographically dispersed virtual teams. You have them in an environment that you can monitor and measure, and use AI to understand how these teams are performing and how to encourage exploration on these teams and make sure that these teams are working in a collaborative fashion at a high performance kind of level. So I think there's lots we could do. And what I was trying to explain to NASA was that as the people within their own organization are learning these tools, they're learning these tools and they're practicing using and applying these tools, these what I call these fusion skills that the employees have to be able to work with machines, work with artificial intelligence at the same time that they're solving these problems. So you're teaching them a new way of working, of connecting with these virtual networks of key people around the world. And you're teaching them the skills to help them to curate the knowledge and share the knowledge in this collaborative environment. And you're doing it simultaneously. I mean, I believe that's the only way to actually change the culture. You know, to change the culture, you're going to need strong leadership at the top from the Army, and we didn't have it at NASA, and we still don't have it. And so the culture itself is very dysfunctional, and that's what's going to happen. You're going to see a lot of failures when NASA tries to do things. They're still doing business the same way they've always done business. And so my urgency in talking to the folks at NASA was them trying to transform the organization and get to the moon in 2024 was going to be a dismal failure. And the main thing I was trying to explain to them was they didn't understand culture, organizational behavior, sociology, and psychology. And that's what it's going to take. You need all of the above. It's not just a technical problem. And so I see the same thing as I'm reading your paper.
So Charlie, I guess you're preaching to the choir here, but
I know.
So a couple of questions. One is, can you tell us something about the relationship between NASA and the large contractors, for example? And also, can you walk us through an example where, let's say, you had a problem to start with, and then how did NASA go about thinking through the process of either doing it internally or partnering on the outside, and then how did it set up a team to do it, and what were some of the outcomes? I mean, you could just walk us through a quick project.
Yeah. I missed the first part of that. You said something about NASA and knowledge something.
No, NASA and its relationship to some of the large contractors.
Okay. So I think you're going to see very similar relationships. What I've seen with the Air Force in the old days, Bharat, NASA used to work side by side with the contractors, and we used our own engineers and scientists to basically critically review what they were doing by doing it side by side and evaluating what the contractors were doing, and also suggesting innovative ideas to the contractors. right now we NASA have lost a lot of that expertise. So I'll give you a shining example, and this is what I'm going to be using in some of the books that I'm going to be preparing in the next couple of years. One of them is on the Columbia accident, right? And so I was on a lot of the teams that were trying to, I basically helped initiate several of the teams to try to understand what caused the accident, and then how do we ensure that the vehicle was going to fly safe. Okay, and what I saw was these large organizations like Boeing, Lockheed, ATK, Thiokol, struggling to solve these problems and not making any progress. Okay, and in the way they were going about these problems. And these particular problems were related to thermal protection, area that I spent like 22 years of my life on. And so I went to my my boss, the head of the astronaut office, and I said, you know, I'm not going to fly in space for several years. We're not going to fly in space till we solve this problem. You know, just let me work with the engineers, the networks that I've known, that I've worked with for 30 years around the country, to put them together to solve this problem. And so I was using what I call the Friends of Charlie network of these key experts in every industry, in every contractor, subcontractor around the United States, pulling them together to try to solve this problem. And what I did was I had a very small team of people, and we basically ran a couple of workshops, but I really had a couple of ideas that I wanted to work on because I saw some solutions to the problem. And so what I did was I went in my friend Don Pettit's garage, who was an astronaut classmate of mine, worked at Los Alamos, chemical engineer, brilliant guy, but he knew nothing about thermal protection systems. And I basically taught him this methodology that I use and I developed to teach young NASA engineers eventually of how to basically immerse yourself in this problem, learn everything you can about the problem, and then go out there in the laboratory, build things, try things, and fail, and learn from your failures. And so basically in a short period of time, me and Don Pettit were able to cycle through dozens of ideas and rapidly came up with the solution to the problem that NASA and